Does everybody remember what we have for topics?
Like the topics of the day?
Yeah. Okay, all right, so we remember all of our topics. Did anybody make changes, any tweaks in your topics?
Technically narrowed mine down,
Fantastic,
so
that's what I expect. Okay, is everybody crystal clear on their category? Okay, so we know our categories. We're going to further this in this process. So before you actually write the outline, you need to actually figure out what kind of organization you're going to have. How are you presenting this information? So this is not just for this here, for this project. This is a life skill for effective communication. So if you organize how you present information, if you organize how you communicate with others in a way that makes sense, you're more effective in communication. So to begin, we know what category we have next, and we're right into the informative portion of the informative and persuasive chapter. Now we got to organize this information. There's a number of different ways to do this, and some of these are more specific to persuasion, and some of them are more specific towards informative, and they both kind of go through everything all at once. So starting off, and I'm going to just focus on informative because that's what we're doing. Starting off, chronological means that you are organizing your information in what's called a time sequence. So time sequence goes only one way. It can't go any other way. If you have a topic that you have to describe in some kind of a time sequence, and it doesn't make sense to present it in any way other than going forward in time or going backward in time, then chronological is your organizational pattern. You can consider this for your entire outline, or you can consider it for a main point. So if it's appropriate at any time to describe something as it occurs in time, then that's a good option for you. So if we look at our categories, what would be a category where a time sequence would be appropriate? A process, an event. Okay. And there's more to it if you start to think more creatively, but this is definitely, those are definitely ways. So who has that? Who has a process? Who has an event? Perfect. Okay. More of you may. This may be appropriate for some of you as you start to think about this more. So think of history class. Okay. You start with some type of punctuated event and you end with some type of punctuated event, and you describe things as they occur in time. Process. First step, second step, third step. Okay, we're doing this adoption process. Okay, how is that done? So that's an opportunity that could be something that you may consider, maybe not. As you go through this, you can think of other things that fit into this. So, I mean, think of your fields. You can consider an illness as a process. The nitrogen cycle as a process. Goes in a series of steps. College education, process. Start with the easier classes, the fundamental classes, and then you move up to things more complex. You can't jump around. You can't jump into advanced classes until you learn this other stuff first. So right there is a time sequence. It's chronological. Lifespan. Okay, these are all things, the seasons, these are all chronological. Okay. So now that I've explained chronological and time sequence, by the way, if you go backwards in time, that seems to be more appropriate from what I see with some kind of a problem solving. So you can see that as, so this big thing happened. When did we first start to notice this issue? And you kind of go back in time and you unravel it. Damage control. Next, spatial. Who knows what spatial is? sound like?
Space.
Yeah. So you're describing something as it occurs in space. Okay, and we can consider, if we just take this to the big scale level of outer space. Okay, we use our solar system and we describe this spatially. So we're describing our solar system as it occurs in space. So that's a really good example. So you start from the sun and you describe the planets going outward. So you're going from inside to outward to describe something as it occurs in space. We had a test in my last class to see who could name all the planets from the sun, moving on out. Can we do that? Oh, come on. What's the first planet from the sun? Okay, I think we can collectively. Mercury. Venus.
Earth.
Ha, here we are. Earth.
Mars.
Good.
Plato.
That's as far as he goes. He doesn't go past Mars. What's after Mars?
Jupiter.
Jupiter or
Saturn.
My class forgot Jupiter. I just realized that. They were so proud of themselves. Okay, which one is it? It's Saturn? I don't know. I don't remember.
Oh my God.
Jupiter and then Saturn.
Okay, then what's after Saturn?
Oh, it's Neptune.
Neptune.
Very good. Did you say you've never heard that one?
I forgot that one. Which one?
He's heard about it.
Neptune.
Okay, there's potentially two more.
Uranus.
Okay, and then somebody was talking about an exoplanet or something like that, which they're not sure after Pluto. Okay, so what's fun about this is that we have an opportunity to describe something as it occurs in space. So there may be something that we may be describing to our peers that we don't quite understand. So it's a good idea to paint that picture as it occurs in space, and we can do that in a number of different ways. So let's go ahead and shut that computer because we're not really listening. So if I were to describe this classroom, I could do this clockwise or counterclockwise. Okay, from the inside to the outside. You can consider a map as a part of this. Maybe if you're describing a certain place, where is this on the map? Okay, and that's an opportunity for you to describe something spatial. You can consider it virtually. How do you get to some place, let's say on your phone, on your computer? And you're actually mixing that with chronological when you start to use it in that way. So how many of you see spatial as an opportunity for an organizational pattern? What's your topic? Yes, painting a picture. Very good. Very common place to use spatial. Okay. So you can consider this as you're going through your research, as you're reading through your documents. Maybe there's something that you can describe as it occurs in space. We have a lot, for this term I seem to have a lot of students that are in childhood education. So describing the classroom is a good way. Got you? No? Not? Who is childhood? Oh, okay. I had the right table.
I have a question. I'm trying to remember like the difference between two. And is it a good way to remember that chronological is something that happens over the years and stuff like that, whereas spatial is like everything you have at the beginning, like when you're talking about painting a picture where you still have all of the things at the beginning and then you go in the process, like with a recipe or you have all the ingredients and then you make it.
Right, but a recipe is actually both of them combined. So, and that's where it gets confusing, because you can say, step one, you have to start with the flour, and then this and that, and and somewhere after comes the eggs. But but spatial is definitely, everything is all present.
Okay.
So like describing how to get to your house.
Mhm.
You know, from the college, those places are still there, so you're
Yeah.
just describing them as they
Yeah, okay.
occur. So that's the one confusing thing, is those two can start to merge into each other, even though they are different organizational patterns. They can also be the same. That's a good question. Okay, now that we've talked about spatial, let's talk about cause and effect. So if we were to use cause and effect, we can use this for our entire outline or a part of the outline. What would we be looking at for categories?
Issues.
Issues, I see issues and conditions as being a big one within that. So what is most appropriate is going to depend on this. You can have cause and effect in both informative and persuasive presentations. So for this, of course, some of your topics may have bias in it. Your job isn't to demonstrate that bias, but to demonstrate the information. So that cause and effect can be there in your informative presentations. And if you fall short of the bias, that'd be perfect in an informative presentation. You can consider something like a historical event or something that happens. Okay, this was the process that brought to this issue here. You notice how I'm using these words that are merging with the categories. And so using chronological, which could be merged with this cause, and then the effect, and this is the result, this is the issue. This is a condition that we have right here due to this. Okay, some of us have some pretty big topics. Does this feel more like home to you? Actually, yours might be, I just remembered we talked about your topic. So you could see that, those events and cause and effect, pushing greatness. You see that? What's your topic? What's your topic?
Travel.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Oops. Okay, obviously problem and solution is reserved for the persuasive presentation, so we're not worried about that. You can have some opportunities for pro-con. You can consider this again for those topics that do have an opportunity for bias within it, but that's not our job. Our job is to enhance our audience's knowledge about something, to tell us something we didn't know, to expand in some way their knowledge of the topic. So when we're looking at pro-con and informative, you have to make sure that you're balanced. This is, by the way, a great technique when we get to persuasion, but you want to have that balanced perspective. You can see this in life. So if you go into a physician and your physician says, you know, you have this condition, we have the condition, can we drop it in here? And you can take this medication, but there's some side effects that you really want to think about before you take this. So you may feel better because of this and this, but you may not feel better when these other things start happening. So that would be an example. If a physician doesn't have a bias on you taking the medication, they could say that. That might be an opportunity for some of you. Anybody see pro-con as something that would work?
Mine's fitness and health,
Uh-huh.
and pro like being like, I'm using like New York Times as one of the sources. And they've got a lot of articles on like elderly men's and like heart attacks,
Mm-hmm.
like by not working out and stuff, that they're more at risk. Like they retire from their jobs,
Mm-hmm.
quit being active, and yeah, having problems like that. So pro con,
Mm-hmm.
heart attack and die. get active and keep moving and stuff.
Okay, and that's gonna be more appropriate for your persuasive, because
Okay.
you're gonna be able to push that, you'll remember that for rebuttals. So,
Okay.
so remember that when we get to that point, that will be appropriate for yours. Maybe not the first one. And then topical, from this point, after topical, it's only persuasion, and then we'll cover those. But topical just means that you're mixing and matching your organizational styles within your presentation. And so you can see how that fits. You can consider your audience, and this is an audience-centered presentation. So what would be most appropriate for this audience? We're a pretty diverse group in here. We're about the same age, we're college educated, so you can make those judgments as far as what would be most appropriate in mixing and matching some of these. Although it is okay to use one organizational pattern entirely. Any questions? All right, let's